Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this seminar series organized by the Empathic Computing Laboratory. I'm your host, Aladdin, and our guest speaker for today is Nadine Wagener, who is currently a PhD student at University of Bremen in Germany. Her research interests are in HCI and VR, supporting mental health and well-being. The title of our talk is Defining the Design Space for Virtual Reality Apps for Well-being and Mental Health. The talk will be roughly an hour, followed by a brief questions and answers. Thank you, Nadine.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction. I'm just sharing my screen now. Set it against it so that I can see you all. There we go. So you should see it now in full screen.
Yes, looks good. Thank you.
Thanks again for the introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be talking to you guys about my research topic and about the general topic of well-being. So I think it's a great fit, and as Nadine actually already said, my topic will be defining the design space of mental well-being support VR reps. I think virtual reality, I think you all know about it, but just in case, I will briefly introduce it. So you're wearing a headset that completely excludes the whole environment, like the reality that you're actually in. And it's a 3D computer-generated world that you see. And if it's a good application, then most of the time you just accept it as this is your new reality, kind of like in this situation, I feel like I'm really there. The subtitle of my talk is actually how VR can make the grass look greener. You will probably understand about this a little bit more during my talk and after my talk. I'm from University of Bremen. HCI is my field of topic there. And my supervisor moved to University of St. Gallen, which is why there's a very close collaboration. And my second supervisor is actually located at UCL, Rogers. Some of you might know her from her books that she's actually writing. From UCL, and so there's another close collaboration there, and I wanted to say hi to you guys. So that's what I did here. To begin with, just who I am and where do I come from. So I'm from Germany, and I have actually studied in Australia, which was really cool, and I know it's at the other side of the world. And then we have New Zealand, which is even further away. So I have the feeling that we're super far apart, actually. But I hope what I will also show with my talk is that topic-wise, it's so closely related, and it's actually great that so many different people from all over the world just think about how to create well-being and how to design for well-being also. So when you look at me in Germany now, I grew up where the little green dot is in the middle of Germany, and then I slowly did my move upwards to the north. I actually did my bachelor's in media sciences and English culture and literature, so nothing related with virtual reality. My bachelor thesis was about different media forms that were used in dystopian novels. So I read a lot of books. And in my master's, which was in interdisciplinary media sciences, I worked closely together with the Volkswagen AG. Probably you know it, a German car brand. And there it was the first time that I actually got into virtual reality, because we had some projects there that I will also talk about a little bit later on. Which was very interesting. And then I had these two sides of oh, I really love to read and write stuff. And but virtual reality is a cool topic. So I tried to combine both and moved to Bremen, which is the big pink dot there. Where I'm located now. And I started my PhD to combine those. I'm still reading a lot, just papers, not books anymore. You will probably know about that. But this is where I come from. And so it is quite an unusual way. I was very happy that during all this time I was very closely working with psychologists together, because this also got me into the topic of well-being and yeah, caring for mental health actually. So, but before I go into it deeper, I will just show you a short video. It is not even in German, subtitles are in German, but it's not important what this person says, it's more important what's coming afterwards. So just enjoy and let's hope that the audio works.
Weißt du, technisch.
Ja, da. Staunen ihr jetzt?
Und das Beste, ihr könnt lieber am Ende selber wollen, was wir schauen. Ja. Hast du das gesehen? Heute die Maschinen funktionieren picobello. Du musst gerade mal Tim anschauen, der ist ein pudelwohl.
Okay, yeah, so this was actually a commercial for some Austrian company that does cheese. It was from 2017, but it didn't stay a commercial, you know, it was like a little bit funny. They weren't really serious about it. They were more like, yeah, you know, give a cow a virtual reality headset and this cow will produce better milk. But the thing is, it didn't stay that way. In 2019, there were actually some Russian farmers that tried it out. And I think closely to the same time, maybe like half a year, 3/4 year later, it was also some Turkish farmers. And both of them said, they swore that their milk was better and they were actually increasing the productivity of the cow as well. So I thought this was actually quite some interesting fun fact. So like give a cow the virtual grass, and no matter if this cow is actually like being placed with thousands of others, it will actually be helpful for her. And just with this mindset, I would like to start my talk actually. Well, of course, it was a little bit more fun, but let's go back to the scientific ones. So well-being support with virtual reality is a thing like for some years already. You might have heard from exposure or anxiety therapy, where people try to get used to their phobias and try to are less afraid of things. Then there's also some stuff about like flow, you know, and getting into this flow, experiencing the flow, because that is also said to be good for the mental well-being in general and also for productivity. Then we have stuff about respiration, for example, so that you learn to breathe, and with like very quiet breathing, something changes. For example, when you are in an underwater scene, like the animals can glow around you with your respiration to give you a little bit feedback about that. You know, and deep respiration is not just good for meditation, but also when you're in a really emotional situation, you know, keep breathing, that's what we say there. And of course, we have the whole field of positive computing. So Kitzen, Prip and Rike, I think they're called, and pronounced. They did a really cool meta study that I can just recommend reading about how HCI is actually doing studies that are related to well-being and positive computing, so that we as designers are actually meant to care for that. You know, there is better design, there is less better design, and there's also design that actually helps that you feel better in the end. But also when you look at just applications that are out there, you know, for example, tilt brush, it's for artistic expression, something that you would not say is related to well-being, but actually there was also some studies that found out that just by being open, being free, and creating your own world and stuff that you just imagine, it's actually therapeutic, or it can be therapeutic. Then we have the field of guided meditation, where you just relax in a virtual environment and experience a new virtual environment. And although some of you might say, well, but you know, meditation, I close my eyes there, like I wouldn't see anything. There have been several studies that show that Especially for beginners, it's a good choice because you have something to focus on, and then your thoughts are just more focused and not as wired. And of course, we have fields like emotion regulation, which is also about experiencing that and learning to regulate emotions so that bad ones are not as bad and good ones are also not as, over the top, but that you're more like getting used to your emotions, identify emotions and accept them. I mean, there might be like several other fields that I have not touched here, why it is important or what is already out there regarding well-being support with virtual reality. But I want to talk, maybe before we go a little bit more into depth there, about what is actually meant with mental well-being support. And for that, I found some short definitions here. So mental relates to how a person thinks, handles emotion, acts, and several strategies for the life's ups and downs. Nothing very new for us here, but it's still, I think, good to see. And then we have well-being, which relates to a general satisfaction with life. So the feeling that everything that we do in our daily lives is actually worthwhile. Also our daily emotions, that is like a constant up and down, but also like the more eudaimonic ones, like the more general happiness, for example, and the more general like feeling that we are actually have a purpose in life as well. And then when you look at all the literature that is related to that, you just know, or you realize that being emotionally aware, so having like this kind of emotion regulation thing, improves mental well-being and also health. But most of the time to see a psychotherapist, for example, to help you with that, if you have problems with that, it's quite tough to do because services are limited. There's social stigma attached just to the fact that you're seeing a therapist. I don't know how it is with you guys there, but for us in Germany, you don't talk about things like that. When you say like you're seeing a psychotherapist, everyone is like, oh, okay, and then topic stops. Or I mean, it's getting a bit better, but it's quite a topic that is not talked about, which is really, really hard because there is immensely, like there are so many people that actually need and want that. And there's also the problem that some of them think they can't do the occupation they want to do or want to do in the future when they have seen a therapist once in their life. Well, let's not talk about or not discuss this any further. But yeah, it is hard to get access to care. And I think, and Foley from 2019 is actually my opinion there, that to help isolated and hard to reach patients, digital means can actually work for that. So they can be not a replacement for therapists, but just, to get you started. Or when you are in therapy, most of them get you homework, when you could do this homework, not on paper, but, maybe use VR or other digital means for that. Johnson also found out that users can actually open up better to their own emotions by visual methodologies, like VR is one. So, there also has been very few studies that show that it might actually be beneficial to do this. But still, what I found in my research is that when you visualize emotions, which is like one of the steps that could work for that, there's like a very limited amount of that. So we have like the 6 basic emotions, for example, sadness and anger and happiness. But actually, they found out that emotions are a lot more. There are 27 distinct emotions that we can have. And most of the time in research, people just look at 2, maybe on 3 of emotions. And this is not just not enough. And I also think that the reflection part upon the emotions is missing there. So yeah, like people are meant like, okay, go into the guided meditation session and then the emotions will be free and you will just realize that you will be better afterwards. But like people are not helped with the reflection if this is actually true and how they can actually do this and how they can then relate this part into their daily lives, because you don't have VR on like in your lunch break, for example. And so when I was talking or thinking about all of this, I thought, well, if I want to do it better, or if I want to do research in this, I'm still missing one crucial point, and this is the interacting part. Like in a guided meditation session, you're just there, you're just sitting, you're seeing and maybe hearing stuff. But well, most of the other VR experiments that I know of, at least, they have the controllers in their hand. What do they do with controllers then? You know, this all of this stuff. So I thought, okay, actually, this is also interesting to look a little bit more on interacting with multimedia content. What I mean with that is interacting with VR, creating contact or interacting with already existing content while already being in VR. And multimedia just refers to every tool that you can imagine. For example, video, photo, comments, so that distributes or gives you information. So in this regard, I found some research that is quite interesting. So mental health care is becoming more personalized. And research found that also this should be transferred to digital ones. So, and of course, to have it personalized, you need to see how different people interact differently with VR. Then self-designing is therapeutic, actually something that I found out, but it's still related to some of literature that is out there. And VR can elicit emotion. It has been proven several times when you are in VR standing at a pit, you know, looking down, you are afraid, you know, your stress level is going up. And also with like colors, for example, if you change the colored setting of the VR, it actually creates different emotions. But all of this is like the system is changed. And then it is looked how the system actually affects the individual person. So, you know, you see a virtual pit, or the colors is changed, or you have a horror game and of course an enemy is coming to you, you know, this is changed. And then most research look at how this affects the individual. So what about the other way around? Like how can the individual actually control and influence the system? And I just found that these are like two major research gaps that actually I want to look in right now with my PhD. So first of all, just to give you like a little bit of a chronologic order of what I did, I looked at interacting with multimedia content within VR. In this case, it was still based on my master thesis. This was right in the beginning of my PhD. So I was like, okay, just to get started into how to write papers, let me write a paper out of my master thesis, which was with Volkswagen. And I found that if you integrate questionnaires into virtual reality, it is actually, the more it is integrated, or the more the user interface is integrated into the virtual environment, the better it is for the user. So we did a user study there. And in this case, they found that the ones to the more right, the intradiegetic user interfaces, are just perceived better, are more enjoyable, and they were also faster with them. And they said they could actually, answer the questions more truthfully because they could still try it out, because they could still see the environment. And this led me to think that, maybe integrating more stuff into virtual reality is actually a good thing. And based on that, I really started my PhD. So I looked at other different possibilities, how you can integrate stuff into virtual reality. In this case, physiological data. There are like 3 to 4 major projects that I will be talking about in the next couple of minutes here. The first one is about predicting moods and about creating a smartphone app that might be able to do this. The second part is we looked at how we can integrate smartwatches in virtual reality. First with like gestures, so that while using your smartwatch, while touching it, while rotating it, or also doing gestures in mid-air, how you can scroll through menus, for example, just to integrate more stuff into virtual reality. And this was also the baseline for how we can use this to automatically adjust the virtual environment. So for example, when you have a heart rate and your target heart rate is 75, but your actual heart rate is, let's say, 120. And then, you know, the whole environment is closed up. You just see like a tiny, tiny bit. But then when you actually relax, and your heart rate goes down, you see more and more of the environment, or that things might grow around you. And the other idea is, which is in the middle on the right side, that you reflect it back and give feedback to the user. So when your heart rate is, let's say 120, it is more bluish, it's raining, it's windy, so that the environment feels like, oh my God, this is not how you should feel, or this is how you feel, but try to get it better. And then the idea was that people, would start to calm down, and when they have reached the target heart rate of, for example, 75, it's way more sunny and colorful. But this was just all theoretically at this point. And then the third big part that I will be talking about in this, in this bit, is how the heart rate can then influence VR entities based on, automatically adjusting virtual environments. And there are like 2 more projects that I will briefly touch upon. So let's start with the beginning. So this was a master student of mine that I was supervising, and it was really promising results that we got there. So the idea was to infer mental health states and to give more feedback to users so that they can reflect more on how they actually feel. So we combined data that we gathered from the smartwatch, like steps taken, sleep, heart rate, skin conductivity, and calories burned, I think. And we combined that and measured that. And then we had some self-reports as well, which you see on the right side. Unfortunately, it's in German. But the first question on the right side is, how do you feel right now? And the second one is, how intense do you feel? So you have this, when you look at emotion, you have this circumflex model of emotions, where emotions are actually put into a grid like this. And on the x-axis, you have the like how good you feel and how bad you feel. And on the y-axis, you actually have the intensity. And this is what is tried to be depicted here. And then we wanted to test how this whole thing increases the awareness of one's mental health status. And though the results were actually quite promising, it was super hard to actually predict the moods. And also when you read up on this whole thing, I don't know if you would do research in this yourself, it is quite hard from just what you get from the smartwatches to kind of predict what people feel. So we said, like, okay, this is a whole new field of topic. There are tons of PhDs that actually deal with that already. So I don't want to go into this further, although our first results were quite interesting. So I thought, like, okay, let's try to look at it a little bit differently. I was already talking about the first thing with like opening up and coloring the virtual environment. And the question was like, how can you use this actually to increase one's relaxation and also to support the self-reflection that you have regarding emotions. And then we had like another project where we like just changed the colors from blue to red, and try to see like in real time and see if there's like a feedback loop. So kind of like when you feel relaxed, it's more bluish, more calm, and when you then get emotionally involved with things, then it gets more red. And the idea was that the more red the environment gets, of course, the more it should agitate you, regarding the literature that we read beforehand. And then you should feel even more agitated and more energetic about things. And then, the red becomes darker, and then, you have this kind of loop or spiral there. So this was also quite interesting. No full paper out of that, just workshop papers that we did about it so far. Didn't have the time yet. I'm in my second year. But there was another project that actually was based on these ideas that we did a full paper on. It is hopefully to be published. ISS was not so fond of it, but if not, I would have come over to see you guys in person. In this project, what we did is that it was kind of based also on Beat Saber. Some of you might know it. So you had like lightsabers in your hand, and you were cutting through balls in music or due to music. And the higher the heart rate was due to the sport of activity that you were doing, the redder the environment became. And then we looked at what people think. Was it more dangerous for them? Was it more threatening? Did they feel more motivated? And we found that the results were quite heterogeneous. So some really, really liked it and said like, oh yeah, it really motivated me to go faster and to hit every ball. And others were like, yeah, I was not sure what was happening. We did not tell them that it was related to the heart rate. So we did not tell them that. And the color that you see here, this like salmon-y color, this is actually the color. And from that moment on, most of them realized that there was a color change in the whole environment. So this is like the magic color there. As I said, hope that this will be published soon. But there's also another project that I just have on my mind, which hopefully I will be doing end of this year. So my idea is that you can also use the smartwatch and the heart rate as input modality to adjust even like more entities. So I was thinking about the whole, how can you help people reflect on how they feel? And during the day, we first have no access to VR most of the time, except if you are lucky enough to work with VR, as I do. And second, sometimes you're just in stress, and then afterwards it's just nice to sit down in the evening and reflect of how, like, what has happened. So the idea is when, for example, at 1 p.m. you had like a big fight with your boss, but afterwards at 3 p.m. you drank some coffee with a friend, which made you like really happy afterwards. You could actually show all of this in VR after you have kind of tracked it with the smartwatch. And and then to see like to use VR a little bit as like a gratitude diary where you write it down, but then you can really enter the emotional world that might be automatically created by virtual reality then. So you can see at 1 p.m. there was like this huge thunderstorm, and you can stand in your emotions, you can look around, you can look behind it, and you see how it felt at that moment. And then at 3 p.m., you might be on a nice meadow and the sun is shining because everything is just like cool and relaxed. So interesting topic there. I'm curious to hear about your opinions later on. If you think that's a good idea, where I should go to, or if you think that's rather problematic. Hopefully you can help me out here. It's still in the finding the right thing to do stage. So just the takeaways that I had from this part. With interacting with multimedia content. In general, in VR, design is wonderful. So in my opinion, what I also realized in all my projects, putting as much stuff in VR is great. It's not just questionnaires in there. It's also, getting your heart rate in there, getting feedback in there, let people evaluate stuff while being in VR. Predicting mood is tough. Research it. I think there is like a big research gap still in this field, and there are different ways how you can actually do it. Some are more, some are less successful. As I said, it's a little bit too far away from my PhD, but I think it's super interesting. So research it and tell me about it afterwards. And the third one is, health data actually works as input modality. It's still quite tough to see if it's just the heart rate or if you also have heart rate variability, skin conductance, and how you can actually create a package out of that. And also, it's sometimes quite hard to know what actually is meant with body battery or something like this. It's quite abstract. But because I'm just looking at the time, I need to hurry up a little bit. Because we have looked at all the stuff, let's actually get into the mental well-being support with VR, which is closely related with interacting, of course, but it has like a little bit like a different focus, in my opinion. There are like these 3 big projects that I will talk about in a second. The first is a role of VR well-being support apps. So what is actually important here? Why should we look at that? And how should we look at that? The second is a big part about mindfulness. We first did a literature review there, and then thought about going into the thing of how important is actually haptic and sound. So the underground that you are sitting on and the sound that you hear to get into mindfulness and to also get into mental well-being. And the last project is VR mood worlds that I did recently, and I will talk about later. Let's start in the beginning here. So this was a fun project. Like most of you know, probably the first project that you're always doing is some kind of literature review. In my case, it was not just literature review. I also looked at the apps that are already out there. And we asked therapists about what they actually want these apps to have. And then we compared it to see if there are any mismatches. I will not go through all of these points. Don't worry about that. Just wanted to say we had mobile apps and we had VR apps, and we compared both of them. So the orange ones are just referring to mobile ones. VR is the dark bluish dots, and the light blue is actually that related to both. And these were the teams that we gathered from the interviews with psychotherapists that we had, what they actually thought was good that these apps should have. More important for us is then we did a search. These were like our initial search results for different apps. We were just typing in well-being in 2 different forms of writing, like with hyphen or without. And then we needed to filter a lot. And in the end, we looked at 45 mobile apps and 15 VR apps that kind of fit to our search results. Just this bit though, that there were so many initial results and most of them had nothing to do with well-being, just showed us how important it is to really define what you are talking about, and also to share this with the community and also with game developers. Because like when you search for a virtual reality app for well-being and you get a horror game, something is wrong. And so this was really like one of the first insights that I had from this project. Yeah, but then because I focused on the virtual reality apps, we just found that there are different ways to do this. Some also include the users in creating their own world a little bit, like nature tracks, for example. You can, with the bubbles, you can create more butterflies, for example, in your environment. A lot go into the direction of guided meditation that I was also talking about. Prana is an app that is also about respiration. So you relive an animal by breathing really slowly. Then D was an example of how you can actually create information and convey them in a well-being app. So this was about a psychologist and so on. And the last one is an example that you can enter different emotional worlds that are colored differently. Yeah, and then we looked at all that and found that there are super many meditation games, which is related to mental well-being, but it is not exclusively that. So like emotion regulation, we found maybe 2 apps, and one of them did not even say that this was emotional regulation. And we also found, like I'm starting at the bottom right now, that most of them were predefined. So you really had a set of fixed environments, and the only possibility where it's partly predefined is when you can choose which environment you want to see, or that you can have more butterflies in there. But the thing of actually creating something was not looked at all. And of course, like the whole reflection part, so like to give them support with their own understanding, was missing there as well. So this was another research gap. I mean, we already figured this out at the beginning, but it was something that I thought like, okay, this is really needed to look at later. But before, my takeaways for you from this study is asking experts is mostly great. Why mostly great? Because yes, I think it's super important to have the expert's view on things when you create something. You know, you want to make sure it is positive technology so that it actually creates something positive. You also want to see if there's the demand or the need for the stuff. You know, research is great, but in the end, we try to do, at least in my opinion, we researchers try to support the community, the people, so is this actually needed what we do? But on the other hand, I also found out that the therapist with which I was talking had no idea of technology. And then it's hard when you give them like ideas and they were like, what is a 3D computer generated world? And you give them examples and you show them stuff and they are still like, I don't imagine this, I cannot see this. I mean, it was also COVID time, so I wasn't able to really show them it. That was a problem there. But just make sure when you do this kind of stuff that you find ways to still talk about that. For us, it was quite a hustle at the beginning, but in the end, we found still common ground with them so that we could actually find some nice results there. I also found that there's a mismatch between demand and offer. This is what I've been talking about. The therapists want the apps to support. They want them to be able to help people reflect, but also that they really stress that the individual is the important part. Not every method works with every individual, but most of the apps just offer one method, and either you take it or you just don't take this app. And this is why I have takeaway number 3, designed for individualization and autonomy. Let's talk a little bit about underground and mindfulness. As you can see here, we wanted to find out how important it is to have haptics and sound included in a virtual environment. So we had artificial grass, people saw virtual grass, and we had them sit down there, relax. We also had some tasks there to get them into presence. You will probably know about presence, what I was talking right in the beginning, this feeling to be really in this place. And we wanted to find out how important it was to feel the grass in contrast to not feeling the grass or feeling the hard wooden floor. I can show you hopefully this video, which is not there it is. So here you can see how it looked like. So you were starting in a hut and then you were entering the front lawn, and exactly at this point we had the artificial grass. So this is how we created the haptic feedback, because we then had a task of picking up apples just so that you also touch the grass with your fingers in the first part. And afterwards you sat on it when we were doing the mindfulness task there. And we also created footstep sound. This is why we had a sensor attached to the heel of the user, and tried to figure out how this relates to mindfulness. I will not go through this, no worries here. We measured presence with 2 questionnaires. And as you can see, like all the conditions with green are the one where they had virtual real grass as haptic feedback, and presence was higher. And in pretty much every condition, even if it was only significant in some of them, for example, in sensory fidelity or in general spatial presence for the IPQ, there was quite a big difference. And footstep sound, as you can also sometimes see, it was not rated that good and also not that important, and sometimes it was even distracting them from their own task or and so on. This is this is the SMS, another questionnaire that is used to measure state of mindfulness. So how does this relate? We can see in the first one that having the haptic feedback of grass is significantly better than having footstep sound. And also throughout the other conditions, it was quite nice. So what this means is, because it is related to the body part of this questionnaire, is that you actually have the feeling to feel your own body more. It's not just feeling the surrounding, but just this thing of feeling something actually helps them focus on their body. And this is also what we found in qualitative interviews that we did afterwards, that they said, I felt my body more because I could stroke through the grass. What I found out here, always measure presence. Even if it doesn't make sense, always measure presence. It's also some of the takeaways that I have from other projects. Reviewers like presence. in virtual reality at least. So even if it doesn't make sense, have a short presence questionnaire. The IPQ is 14 questions. Maybe there's even a shorter version out. I just know the one with 14 right now. And yeah, just report that presence was high. You don't have to do a box plot there, you know, just do it because reviewers like it and they reject papers when you have not measured presence. And in general, which is maybe even more important for you, include haptics. So footstep sound was not that important. Environmental sound was important, but not like significantly important. But even if you have the possibility to just give them like, I don't know, a small square of grass where they can stroke through, or when they are sitting on stone, give them a cold stone and all the stuff, it really helps them to focus, especially when people are not so sure what like mindfulness is or are beginners in meditation, for example. You know, it ties quite nicely into this whole field of VR meditation. And it really helps them to settle down and to, yeah, be more happy in the end. We also found that you should design for less is more. So our environment, as you can see, it was quite rich. You know, it was calming and so on. We had animals in the background because they needed to count them for the first task. And we found that for the mindfulness part, less is more. So people said they wanted to look into the sky, for example, or they deliberately looked away from the animals because they were moving really slowly. And they said like, nah, I don't want to see this. They didn't even want to have wind in the leaves. They were more like, you know, I want to have like a relaxing time, not too much visual input, to be able to focus really on what is in the moment, which is mindfulness, right? Checking, okay, I really need to hurry up, so I will skip through this probably. Just that you know, I did some more thinking about reflecting on emotions, how you can do this at home, which was the basis for VR Mood Worlds, a paper that I handled in this year's CHI. Some of you might have seen it, as I heard. So yeah, so the idea was to build upon this whole thing of designing your own environment while already being in VR and have really this autonomy as a user to do the stuff that you want, not the stuff that others think you might want. So we had the design and implementation of this application. It was a quite exploratory approach. And yeah, we offer some insight there. We did a pre-study. I will just skip through it. It was on paper, also due to COVID, of course, in this case. But I found that although we are in a digital world, people really enjoy sometimes to have the feeling of writing with a pen or creating some mood boards as was here on paper. So we should not just discard this because we think like, yeah, you can also draw on a tablet or something like this. Sometimes it's really nice to go back to the roots, and results are similar. So why not also use the old methods? And from this pre-study, I hope that the video is loading. Yes, it does. We created mood worlds. We had different objects that you can resize, throw away if you want to delete them. And you had different brushes that you could use just to draw whatever you want. You could change between different predefined environments. This was one of the reasons, because some of them told us in the pre-study that they really had trouble imagining how an emotion looks like. And the task was to remember something that really really made you happy, and to kind of convey this feeling to others that might enter the mood world, or rather to say the other way around, that you use this means of visualizing it to also then be able to take a step back and to reflect on it and to relive this moment, but also to think a little bit about it more. And then we did an evaluation. It was in a remote setting. We had the emotion induction. I was just talking about this, and then we measured happiness with 2 different questionnaires, had some semi-structured interviews in the end, where we talked about the whole experience. And when you look at this, so before and after doing mood worlds, we can see, which is in green here on the left, we can see that happiness has increased significantly, and like really significantly. So they said it also ties in with the qualitative stuff that they said, that it really made them feel happy, and they were thinking about it if it was just a very short-term happiness that they felt or a long-term. And this is just the short-term here that is depicted on the left side. Negative feelings did not change, which was also not intended. And on the right side, you have the more eudaimonic feelings, so the more long-term happiness, which is measured with the Oxford happiness questionnaire. And there is no significant difference here. And when we look a little bit more into what they actually created, you can see in A, for example, there was a very descriptive scene of friends being on a couch, having a nice evening. They have some wine on a table, and they were gaming. So it was very, literally trying to recreate the memory. The second one was also going in this direction, but using a lot of like environments and presets, and then just adding like the sun, which is going down, and the sailing boat, which is on the water. So things that were not really there, but this person thought was actually nice to have in that environment. And then there were people who were really abstract that used swirls, and then they had like coffee beans and blueberries in there because they said, oh, I want to include smell, I want to include taste, I want to remember that. And by looking at it, it helps me with that. I also added some of the quotations that we gathered. For autonomy, for example, one participant said, you were just so free. I could have drawn stick figures, but you could also choose armchairs or something else, in this case, to represent people. Just to have the possibility to decide, that was great. And this was, you know, what we designed for, and it was great to get this feedback because, of course, we didn't tell them what we designed it for. And it was also important that people could really stand in the work of art, that it was, you know, all around them, and that they could really feel the emotions. So this is, I added this here to just make you aware that virtual reality is a new medium, and I always like to ask, why should I use VR now? I mean, I'm a fan of VR, I work with that, so of course that is my answer. But if I cannot answer this question, why VR in this situation, I'm not doing the study. And this is also something that I would advise you to do, because in my opinion and in my recent projects, VR sometimes is used by others to just have the novelty factor, you know, like, oh, no one has done it in VR, let's just do it in VR. For me, this is not enough. I want to answer why it is actually beneficial. And in this case, it is this standing in emotions that actually make you feel them more than when you just write about them, which is also one of the things that I found out in my study. Next video, let's see if it works. There it is. So just to give you a little bit more here, people said that the animations were really great. So, you know, like that brushes could work, you have fireworks, you have butterflies that can fly around, you have bubbles that you can use. All this energy that is conveyed by the app itself actually made them also more confident in what they were drawing. They were more creative, and they really said that in this case, happiness was very tightly linked with energy and motion in itself. And they also wanted to move through their creation, so also the real motion was important here. Yeah, we have already seen this. Next slide, please. There we go. To give you some results here, we found just by looking at the qualitative interviews that actually the PERMA theory of Seligman is or was completely spoken to by people. So PERMA relates to different things that are related to well-being. So P, for example, stands for positive emotion. R stands for relationships with other people, and so on. And all of this was mentioned by our participants in quite an emphasized way. We were surprised about that. We did not think that this would happen, but it was cool to see, of course. It was great feedback. And then we also looked at positive technology. So how could VR mood worlds, which is the name of the app, actually be called a positive technology? We found that hedonic elements are definitely there. For example, the PANAS questionnaire was super significant. So short-term happiness was increased. Eudaimonic was like in between, although some people reported that they had quite a lasting happiness effect. Some of them were not. Oxford Happiness Questionnaire was non-significant, so I would not say that this has to be true. This is something that should be looked at in the future. And then we also gathered some use cases that our participants said. So first of all, they said it was, for a lot of them, it was an intrapersonal experience. So they didn't want to share it with others. They wanted to have this experience for themselves, but they want to have a catalog where they can re-enter emotions and relive what they were actually drawing at that time, sometimes even change it afterwards. Some said it would be cool to have an interpersonal experience with friends, for example, or with a therapist, to have the creativity boost. That were also the people that were more thinking about, oh yeah, I wanted to look pretty, but I'm missing some inspiration here. It would be cool to share this with others. And some said it would also be cool to have negative emotion worlds. When you're really, really angry, you have this thunderstorm in red and in pink, and it swirls around you, and then you take off the virtual headset, normal reality sets in, and you just got rid of the feelings. And this was also what inspired us for some future work. I'm working on this right now for this year's CAIS deadline. So the idea is that how can you create negative mood worlds, and what differences do you need to have for a positive mood world? Because you still want to create something positive in the end. You want them to feel better. You don't want them to be submerged in their anger. So I will just talk about these three things in detail here, which is just sketches that I have for this work right now. The first is, if you have like an anger mood world, you could take a picture. You could use this picture as material for a lantern, for example, and then you have the lantern, it flies into the sky, and then you are ended up in a nice world, for example. Other possibilities would be, I don't know, to burn the whole thing away, and it just dissolves, and you end up in something nice, like on a meadow with sunshine, for example. Or you could fold it into an airplane, throw away the airplane, have focus shifts. So we are thinking about different ways to design here. And this is also why I'm including this here, because doing storyboards, as I did here, is really helpful. And there's so many out there. But at one point, you just have to decide for something and go with that. If it's the right decision, no one knows. You will probably see if the reviewers say it's good or not. But also at this point, I'm including experts again. I will ask therapists again, actually tomorrow, about what they think about these different approaches. What is the method that they use in their daily lives and in their daily work? And I think at this point, it is important for them to see this. This is why I also did these storyboards, but also for you with your own projects. When you have the feeling that there's too much out there and you cannot really decide, and you have talked to colleagues about it, and they were like, yeah, I like this one, I like that other one, I like that, I don't know, my negative emotions get stars in the skies. Something like this, ask experts, because they know about stuff, they will help you, and they will, even if they say, well, I also decide for this, and another one wants version B or C, you will still get a feeling of what the majority says, but also about if people are really emphasizing points, and this will help you in the decision process. This is what I hope to gain out of this, and what I hope that you will be happy with it all. So the takeaways for the mood worlds is, first, why design at all? Like, we are talking about the design space of virtual reality apps that support well-being. But why should actually redesign it? Why don't we have our own users design it? Why don't we have a very user-centric design, if at all? Or as I did, just give them the autonomy to do it themselves. They will have fun with that, and you are out of the hassle how to design it, actually. Make well-being fun by design. So for me, it was using the unique VR opportunities, like having the emotions all around yourself, and give them like animated brushes and so on. so that people had fun with using my app. Even if you don't give them the task of designing something that makes them happy, which was in pilot studies and so on, they had fun. And by having fun in this thing, I just want to say that, you know, the guided meditation with the very quiet environments is probably really great. But, you know, we are still in a world where entertainment and gaming is one of the, you know, major points. And we can include this with well-being. It's not that well-being and caring for well-being has to be boring, as some people say. It can be really fun. And this was what I gathered here and I wanted to share with you. Apart from that, I already talked about autonomous design options. Having a framework like some predefined environments helps them with their creativity, and we really need to think of personal use cases. So we have wrapped it up. We have talked about interacting with multimedia content. We have talked about mental well-being. I've talked about a lot of projects and about my takeaways that might help others in this field as well. But before I stop, let's go back to the original question. How can VR make the grass look greener? And of course, I'm not talking about this cow per se, which is looking at greener grass through the virtual reality headset. But just like to sum up what I was talking about, ask farmers. And I don't mean like always farmers, but of course ask the experts that are actually related closely to the user group that you have in mind, right? Give them also the tools to design for themselves. Maybe have some focus groups if you really, you know, if you don't want to have an autonomous design as I did, you know, use a user-centered approach. I really feel that this was very beneficial and sometimes so different from how I would have done it, and it broadens the mind. Think of different input modalities, right? So of course, the normal ones for VR is using controllers, but maybe, you know, use the heart rate to change something. Or I don't know what the cow would do, you know, maybe if it chews more, then something else happens, you know, just think outside the box there with input modalities, because the more you get into VR, the better it is, in my opinion. And give the cow some real grass. In this case, it fits quite nicely because of the study with the undergrounded grass. Yeah, include some haptics if you can. They were also talking about multi-sensory experiences, like having wind, having a little bit of heat of the sun. It is sometimes quite hard to do. I understand the struggle here. But it's also something that I will definitely look a little bit more into in my future, to include some more haptic sensations to keep us grounded while we are in VR. And of course, you should have fun by doing your own projects, but also your users should have fun with the whole thing. So design a little bit for enjoyment, for a good user experience as well, and include them in the design process. And if you want to read a little bit up more about it, go more or back to the basics of science and not just talk about cows and VR glasses. Here are some of my publications that I did. So you're very welcome to also write me a message with questions if you have any. Before I start, I will just click through this really quickly. These are some projects that my colleagues are doing. So one of them is, if it's playing, yes, it is. It's looking, for example, into how to have virtual weight by changing the controller and how you can simulate that. We have a colleague that is going into the direction of well-being of children, not just with augmented reality intangibles, but right now she's doing a project about how you can create connectedness to other people. For example, grandparents that work together with their children with Lego bricks, and they are in remote settings, but they can still see where the other one puts the bricks and so on. We have some colleagues that go into the direction of navigation and spatial cognition. New ways of navigating that is not just Google Maps, or how you should actually make this better to help you orient yourself better. E-health and medical technologies is also a big field, a little bit of machine learning that we do as well, and some research into space exploration, in this case, for example, an augmented reality app for a greenhouse on Mars. So interesting stuff there. I'm super happy now to answer some questions, and I would just like to thank you again for having me and talking a little bit about my topic. And I hope that some of the takeaways that I mentioned might help you in your research piece as well. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Nadine. That's great to hear about all the work you have done here. It's inspiring work as well. If anyone has questions, please go ahead, ask, or you can raise your hand or add question in the chat. I will start with a quick question. So I like that you wanted to visualize emotions, and I was wondering, yeah, so some of or most of the work is visualizing emotion that you have done is either changing color or changing in the virtual environment. I'm wondering if you thought about visualizing emotion as another character, as an avatar or someone in your environment. Do you think that would be helpful or useful in any sort of way?
Yeah, tough question. One that I also ask myself quite a lot. I personally, I shy away from doing work with avatars. For mood worlds, for example, people said they did not even miss having like people there because they could represent it in other ways. I often get like points like, but well, this person doesn't look how I imagine it to look, and these small things might keep them away from either reflecting about emotions, of being more creative with that. I was touching upon like the multi-user setup that might work. I'm still not going in this direction. I think it is a good future work. In my opinion, it's like a two-sided sword. That's why I decided to not include any form of people or persons there. There's actually another project where I'm looking into VR guides, where I have like, a speech-related bot that helps you to reflect. This is still a very like early approach. This is why I have not included it into the thing. But even there, we said we don't want to have a representation that is visual, not even a person, but like, I don't know, even a cat that you talk to. So we have decided against it in a group. So I hope this answers the question. I don't have like a yes or no. I would say for me, it's definitely no. I would still say it might be nice for others to do the research. It's just like you really have to have like the knowledge to do it on a very like fine basis and always check with users if they like it or not, because it can be creepy at some point.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. I see Rico has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for a great talk. And I'm very excited to see that they're changing their virtual reality environments is according to the user's internal state. And because I also doing a similar project now using their virtual character, but I'm real curious about it. Did you get some positive or negative feedback from in the user study? Yeah, I'm very curious about it as a casual style feedback about it.
Yeah. So most of the feedback that was like negative was related to some usability aspects of the app itself. So it was still that you needed to be attached with the cable to the computer because of the objects that were in a data bank and whatever. This moving through the environment was really important, and because of the cable you were a little bit restricted there. So this was most of the negative feedback that I got regarding mood worlds. Some of them say that you really need to think about different user groups. So for example, doing this mood worlds with a happiness setup is good, and I would say now that I've done the study, even people with depression or other health problems or mental health problems are kind of secure to use it, but you can never know how they use it, So if they decide at some point that they want to create something with happiness, but they drift up into something negative related, it might be really hurtful, because virtual reality is a very immersive medium. So that's some of the comments where people just said like, oh, you really need to be careful about that. Do ethics beforehand, which really helps, although it's a hassle to do, of course. So that's something that I would say there. Some other negative feedback that I got. Yeah, sometimes they just say it's too much fun, actually. So they drifted up into being like in very childlike excitement, and oh, I felt like I got the first, like when I was 11 years old, I got my first Nintendo. Yeah, so sometimes you need to find ways to gently remind people that they're actually doing a task and a study right now and not just doing stuff. So that was some of the feedback that I got that might be helpful here. Do you have any other specific questions for a specific study with negative feedback that I got?
Thank you. And in your user study, there almost participants were the BL experienced users or new users?
Half, I would say. I think most of the time due to COVID, I needed to, like in a remote setting, people that either have the system at home already, so then of course they have a lot of VR experience, or find people in uni that are there. Then I would say it was not that experience. In the recent study that I had also for mood worlds, by the way, it was half, but more were not experienced, or it was the first time actually that they experienced VR. I took this a little bit into account, so then they were like very excited about that, like, oh my god, this was so cool that you could create something. I was like, okay, I'm not taking this now into account because it's probably the novelty factor. So I try to kind of reduce that, but in general, I would say my user group are half. Some of them not experienced or just very, very little experience. And I would say, yeah, maybe even 60-40. So 60% not experienced, 40% experience with VR.
I get it. Thank you. Thank you for answering.
Thank you. We have a question from Gun.
Hello. Thanks for the nice presentations. Sorry, I had to miss some of the later parts because of answering a phone call. So excuse me if I'm asking the same questions, but regarding some of the studies you've mentioned using color to represent emotions, is there any studies or findings regarding the mapping between emotions and colors? Because I kind of feel like sometimes that could be arbitrary and sometimes different depending on the cultural background or each person's personality. I wonder if you looked into those literatures looking into the mapping between colors and the emotions, and if you can advise on some pointers to look into.
I can advise actually my workshop paper, considering colored light for emotional reflection, I think it was, heavily there, because I discussed it there in related work. So you're right, it is quite personal. So if blue means relaxation, or I don't know, something else, maybe someone was in a blue room once and had a very bad experience, and of course blue means something different for this person. But there are still some that like some studies that were done from psychology that looked at using colors on a global matter, and they compared different cultures from different settings with each other. And this is also why we decided to have blue for relaxation and red for being agitated, no matter if it's like a good agitation or a bad agitation. Yeah, because the intensity is different that you feel. And there are some studies that have like this overall view and try to compare stuff and try to generate like, yeah, like from color psychology side. So read the paper there, you will find some, some short discussion about that. You will find the papers there. Yeah, and then it will have probably the starting points to look into it further.
Right.
So I would say, just to answer really, really shortly, yes, there is a personal matter, but yes, there's also some colors that you will probably have, like, I don't know, like 80-90% of population that kind of feel the same about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Good question.
Thank you, Gun. Any other question?
Yeah, so I have a follow-up question with what Gun asked. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, and yeah, I missed your Kai presentation, so good to see the paper. Yeah. So following up to what Gun asked about the color and mapping, I remember you had one experiment where you were talking about heart rate influencing the VR entities, like the Beat Saber one, or just before that there was one more. So where you were changing the color light and measuring their heart rate as well. So blue color for relaxation and red for agitation. Did you observe any change in the actual heart rate being changed? So for example, if they started with a neutral environment with a X heart rate, and when they experienced blue, did the heart rate change? Was there any specific pattern with blue or red color when you changed, and like if it mattered at all? Or yeah.
Yeah, there's also some initial literature. You can also have a look there where they changed the color and actually found some differences in heart rate. For us, it was similar. So they, as you said, they started in a neutral environment. We mapped it personally. So of course, some people just have higher heart rates than others. So it was a normalized thing. And we gave them some emotional stimuli, so videos to watch that were like a roller coaster and some, nice puppies that make you happy. And yeah, the heart rate changed based on the emotions, and then we changed the colors according to the heart rate, which of course then, as I said, like this feedback loop, changed the heart rate again. So this is what we did in this one study that you mentioned before, the Beat Saber one. Yeah, and we found it does work. So the color has an influence on heart rate. So for us, the redder the environment got, the higher the heart rate got. So there was this interlink between these two entities. It is still very it's a very minor thing. We are not talking about differences in heart rate of, I don't know, 8 beats per minute, which is not much. I think we had 3 or 4. So like if from the neutral one, like the heart rate rises by 4 beats per minute and goes down by 4 beats per minute, then we change the color to the maximum of that we had, so that you have a gradual changing of the color in between. Yeah, and we are, as I said, I'm looking into weather scenarios right now, just to see if we have a little bit more, more effect there on the heart rate. This is also why I decided to go away from the color more towards the weather thing. And then I will compare, hopefully. I cannot say anything to that, so study is not yet done.
Yeah, thank you for the response. I think it follows the same biofeedback thing. So I mean, another question would be to check about, like, how do you think like in the weather one or the next one, do you think like using the heart rate could be just one, like as a measure, just heart rate could be enough? Or maybe if you would want to introduce like the skin conductivity or other physiological measures, do you think that can be an option, like having more detailed analysis rather than like subjective and just heart rate value?
Yeah, it's not just the option, it's actually the way that I'm going right now. So I'm trying to create like a cohesive picture from heart rate variability, skin conductance, all the things that we know are stressors. Maybe even like if I find out exactly what Apple does with body battery, which is not yet 100% sure, because you don't get the raw data, you just get like this accumulated results there. So answer is no, heart rate is not enough. In our pilot study, it was okay because it was more about like, getting the connection between Unity and the smartwatch, trying to see if it actually does something. So this was the first experiment, which is also why I have not done a full paper out of it, because I just thought like it was not enough for a full paper. I think just the heart rate is not enough because as a measure, it's just a very, very tiny bit, and its heart rate can rise between, various reasons. And also in my next project, I'm really thinking about how to differentiate between, doing sports, where of course heart rate rises, and having an emotional, I would say, discussion with someone, for example, the example with the fight with the boss that I had there. to create this cohesive picture out of smartwatch data is something that I'm still looking into right now. If you have any more information about that, I would be very happy to hear about that, because I think that just looking at the heart rate is, you cannot predict mood of that. As I said, we had this one project where we tried to predict mood from heart rate, step count. So like if you're doing more sports, then you have more endorphin in your blood, you feel more happy in general. And although it was good, it was just like this whole new field of how you can actually measure this just by body signals and health data. And so as I said, it's not my strong suit here. I did this one project, it was cool, but it's a totally different field. So if any of you have any insights into that, I would be very happy to hear about them from you actually.
Yeah, I mean we can have a separate call. I think that will take a long time. But yeah, I think so our lab worked with the physiology and VR and emotion, so different scenarios. So I think Riku is right now working with the avatar based modeling. So he is using physiology but analyzing it to change the features from the avatar. So yeah, we can talk about that. I don't know if anyone else has a question. So I can take one. I have one more question, but I can ask that if no one has any question.
Yeah, go for it, Connor.
Oh, okay. So yeah, a question about your literature review or the app research that you did. So in that you might have explored some sort of adaptability, or like the idea of your VR adaptation game. So let's say if you want to adapt a VR game, and then from your whatever research experience that you have, from there when you adapt the game, was like if there's any game, then the objective was to change the difficulty level of the game, or like to bend it more towards like positive technology, or sort of like if you say exposure therapy, then negative experience, and then like were they changing the difficulty level of the thing, or just changing the color or anything for the upliftment of mood or something?
Yeah, so we looked at 15 apps, and none of them changed difficulty levels. What they did change is either the environment that you experience, but there are no difficulty levels there. And there was this one app, which was actually like part of a website that deals with well-being in general. And they had different approaches there. I would still say it's not a difficulty level, but you could, for example, have guided meditation, and then the next step would be, to have meditation by yourself without any guidance, so you get like a tutorial phase beforehand, and then, do it by yourself. So this might count as one, but I would say in general, the ones that I've looked at in this literature review not, and also the ones that I've seen since, I mean, there has been one or two that I thought were quite interesting that came out after the literature review. As long as I can remember, they did not change any difficulty levels. Same for me so far, like Mood Worlds just has one difficulty level. It depends on your own, what you want to draw, if you say like, okay, this is more difficult or not.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting thought.
I mean, by difficulty level, I can rephrase like increasing or decreasing the cognitive load of whatever, like the cognitive processing or emotional processing of the scene. So not necessarily like you increase or you make the target come faster, or could be like, as you are saying about the weather. So maybe like if you increase the fog density and reduce the visibility, so that increases the cognitive processing of the person, right? So, I mean, yeah, in terms of that as a difficulty level.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understood it differently before. I would say still the answer is no with the ones that I had. So there was this one where you needed to breathe to revive animals.
Mm-hmm.
And some animals were also a little bit harder to, revive. And I know that it starts in a very black environment, and afterwards you have very foresty environments, so you have more visual input. So it could mean that cognitive load is higher there in this app. And there was another one. I also included it in the presentation with like the different colored worlds that you can enter.
The Mind Labyrinth VR dreams,
Yeah,
right?
Mind Labyrinth VR. which is very cool app. And some of the worlds are like more elaborate than others.
Mhm.
So I think there was even one poly world, like low poly world. I could imagine that things are different there, but you don't have a specific task. So I don't think that there's like anything like related to mental load. Apart from that, the apps that I have looked at have not included anything like that, as far as I know. There's one that might be interesting for you, where they added like the different information about psychotherapists, for example, about the things that they test there. But this is also an app that is less about gaming, because there's like a series of mini games that they put together in one app. And these apps, they show you afterwards how I don't know how creative you are, and there are different measures that they then give you as a result in the end. So it's like a very psychological based thing, but there the mental load might be definitely higher than like compared to the other apps, because you actually do stuff, you need to read stuff, you need to understand what's actually going on. There are also some games about frustration. They're really hard. So like you do it all the time and you cannot hit the target, but you don't know it. So these kind of stuff, just to see how long does it take for you to stop it and to say like, nah, don't want to do it anymore. So this is something that might be interesting for you there. Apart from that, I cannot really help you to give you something like, hey, look at this. This is doing it in a great way, like visually or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
yeah. Thanks for the suggestions, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't find any specific recommender system which is using a specific element. So that's why I thought maybe if you have some idea. But yeah, cool. Yeah, maybe I can email you later on and talk to you more about it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kunal. Great questions. I have two last questions, unless anyone else has any more. No? Okay, so our lab also, probably Kunal mentioned, we work with EEG to understand more about brainwaves. Do you think we can use these brainwaves in a kind of to increase well-being in general, or to understand more about the state of well-being and or emotions? So this is the first question. I guess I will wait and then I'll ask second question later. Hopefully shorter.
my answer is yes. I think EEG is great. I was thinking about doing some of my stuff with that as well. Also for like, I call it like predicting mood, right? So the case that you can actually kind of tell them how they feel, because I just found that there's still a big difference about being able to identify emotions and feeling them. So sometimes I have the feeling that people are just detached from their bodies. And it's also what the psychotherapists tell me a lot, that they really need to teach them how sadness feels. Because sadness is not just sadness, but it's also anger. It's also being distraught, being nervous. So it's not just this one emotion. And then, sorry, people are able to say, oh yeah, I'm feeling sad, but all the other like small things that are tied with that. So that they are allowed to feel them, and because of that, I think it's sometimes it's really beneficial to kind of get them like an image of their inner feelings and visualize that to the outside and make them re-experience that, for example, through VR. I think it's a super cool area of research. I'm very interested in what you are doing there. And I mean, I looked at some of the topics, look great already. Really keen on what you're doing in the future there as well. We don't have the money to buy it right now, at least. And I think also then it's quite valuable to work together with experts that have already experienced in this kind of stuff. So my focus for me personally and in my PhD is to support people at home that use the minimal technical effort. So that's why I would say it's not something that I'm focusing on in my PhD, because most of the people don't have EEG at home. But it is something that I think is really valuable, because if you can actually figure out how to create the inner emotional world to the outside, and I think EEG would be really helpful for that as one measure. I think that could be very beneficial for users to see and to re-experience.
Yeah, that's great. I think maybe the next generations of virtual reality headsets, they will come equipped with these sort of measuring EEG-like brainwave signals. But yeah, I understand. Maybe perhaps we can do some collaboration in the future where I guess some of your ideas, we can work with them here or in Australia and collaborate. The second question, I think you mentioned something about hedonic, and that reminded me of something called hedonic adaptation, where you experience happiness, and then after a while, because of hedonic adaptation, then happiness is no longer happiness, or like it's less than happiness. Do you, in the VR environment or in this changing virtual world environment, do you see that you would do anything to accommodate for hedonic adaptations? That means like you will increase whatever effect or whatever you are doing to increase happiness, or would that reach a limit at some point that VR cannot solve anymore and people get used to the happiness that they got from VR? The grass is green already, you cannot add more green to it or something like this.
So far I have not done any changes because I was like, I was letting my small users free, and experience it in a very free way. Yeah, so I think my opinion about this is rather that because you always create something new, you still have like new happiness that you experience, especially when you kind of build yourself a catalog of mood worlds, for example. So of course, at some point, the world that you might have drawn like 3 months ago might not feel as happy as it was before, when you're experiencing it. And it was like, yeah, okay, this is now just a nice environment, maybe. But it doesn't really affect you emotionally anymore. But like my approach is then create something new, create something different that might help you with that, and that might, have these feelings reemerge. So that is my approach right now. I understand that sometimes, changing VR to kind of, adjust to that would also help. It's also a little bit of deceiving the user a little bit, I think it's also an ethical question in that regard. So how much are you allowed to tweak without the user being unhappy about it, maybe? Most of my users were actually also still trying out how far they can go and where are the limits of VR, and they were quite inquisitive about stuff, especially with the mindfulness and underground things. They were like, is this really exactly the point where, grass begins? So I could imagine that if these users would get behind this whole thing, that they might be a little bit like, I found that they tweaked it. So my answer would be, for me personally, it's not a big issue. It's not a problem. It's not also something that I plan to do in the future. But I can see that for other directions and for other applications that might have like a longer term, running, it's important. I wanted to do a long-term study of mood worlds actually, just to see how hedonic and eudaimonic elements change when you use it for, I don't know, several times or for months even. But as you know, like doing longitudinal studies is always quite tough, especially when you need VR setups that like run on a regular basis. So but that would be one of the questions. If I had done the longitudinal study, would have been one of the questions that I would have probably seen in the end, like that people said, well, it was great at the beginning, but after some times I just lost the interest in it because, it didn't make me as happy as before. So interesting question. Answers a little bit like, swaying from one side to another side, not a clear yes or no here for me.
There's probably no clear yes or no. I just was interested to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
But good question. Like, it's good to think about stuff like this as well.
It seems that no more other questions. Thank you, Nadine, very much for sharing your time and talk and your research experience with us. We appreciate this presentation. We look forward to collaborate in the future if possible. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here, and as I said, I'm open for collaboration. Still only in my second year, so I have some more time left. Also thinking about doing a postdoc maybe afterwards. So I will stay in this topic area. I'm very interested in also having like new approaches. As I said, I'm working with sports scientists together right now just to see how we can like approach health as a very general topic, an overall topic. So I'm really open also to new directions, to new ideas from the outside. And if you have anything, or if you want to just talk a little bit more, just write me, give me a call, whatever.
Amazing.
It was really great. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night for you, right?
Yes, and have a great morning. Thank you for the presentation too early, but that was amazing. Thank you.
It was not too early, it's fitting into my day, doing summer school now, doing conference next week, so it was still great time-wise.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again,
Talk to you
bye.
soon. Bye.